Oh shit. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Good to have you. Let's see here. Gotta refresh that. That's a little bit better. There we go. Now we're connected in. Took it a minute. We got a great little show for y'all today. First thing is we're gonna do a little bit more gaming on old school RuneScape. We're gonna test a few items. But we're also going to talk about taxes because I've recently done my tax bill and I've got everything I need to know. So we're going to go through, we're going to get started on a little bit of that. Should be a pretty good time. Hopefully, if y'all have got other questions, y'all can just let me know. Keep getting DMs. I'm like, bruh, no, I'm live. Come hang out on YouTube. Anyway, for questions, as always, y'all, askbullmuscle@gmail.com. Let's go ahead and dive in. Gonna have a good little stream for y'all here. So the first thing we're gonna talk about is, you know what, before we go back, I'm gonna talk a little bit about my day because it has been a busy one. It has been a whopper of a day. Oh, yes, I have the Aggie hat on because earlier I was walking out in Aggie gear, just happened to be what I picked. And I'm shirtless now because all my shit's in the laundry. Today's laundry day. Go ahead and, do we have music going on here? There we go. See a little bit on here. We got Hi Big Dink. Okay. Let's see here. I need to go ahead and hide the source while I put in my pin because otherwise there's no point in having a pin. So we'll do that. So while I talk taxes, we're just going to do a little bit of smithing, just as sort of background content, and then we'll actually play something, we'll actually do something on this game once I'm done talking taxes. So we'll kind of go that way. There we go. Ba, 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 ba. Awesome. Set that up. Boom. Okay. So we're going to do... Okay, stroke it off from the private DMs. We're gonna go ahead and close that off. Who cares? I don't really give that much of a shit. Anyway, so let's first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about my day because it has been a doozy of a day. It's been a good one. We've got, I see Mickey has changed his name once again. We've got today I hit a pretty decent shoulder day. I was definitely I'm a bit overtired, have not gotten enough sleep to recover from the crazy 2 weeks, both in New York City, and then the week I had after this was just wild. So from the 10th to the 14th, we had the Radiological Engineering Directors meeting here at the shipyard, and I was asked to support that, which means I was working long hours. So that also meant, my sleep schedule was not very good, and my diet was also not very good. Large part of that is my own failing. I need to be better even when conditions aren't optimal, right? You have to be able to, roll with the punches, and I didn't do that as effectively, I think, as I should have. So, beyond that, what else has been going on? Today, hit a shoulder press day. It wasn't bad. 5 repped at 185 on press. Probably could have gotten a 6th, but again, it was a little bit low on energy, but overall not a terrible workout. Immediately jumped out of that, hopped in my van, and went all the way out to the eastern edge of the island at Makapu'u Point. Met some friends for a nice little hike ski. Filled up my van. First fuel tank is in the books. I need to update my spreadsheet because I am that kind of nerd. I'm going to track fuel economy over time, because I do want to make a few adjustments to the vehicle that should increase that number. Roughly got about 25 to 27 miles per gallon. It's a little bit of a rough estimate because I idled it a little bit when I was just starting up, and I think fuel economy will increase over time because I understand how to drive the vehicle a little bit better, right? You know, what throttle input you need to go a given speed takes a little bit of getting used to. One thing I love about living here, you know, and constantly using slippas is I can drive barefoot almost all the time, which really helps me modulate pedal feel because it's such a small pedal box and the pedals themselves are very small that you really don't need much input to get a change in throttle response. The other thing being, of course, this is a very low powered vehicle, so knowing exactly how much throttle you need, well, I mean, a lot of the time you can go full out, but it's a 31-year-old engine. I want to treat it with some level of mechanical sympathy, especially if, say, it's a bit cold. I'm gonna do that. There we go. That's a little bit better. So, is your van a stick shift? I wish it were. I will catch up on comments, but since this is germane to the conversation, it is not. So it is a 94 Subaru Sambar. Unfortunately, mine comes with the eCVT transmission, which is a 90s CVT, which means it's slow as shit. The benefits of this are that in Honolulu traffic, I don't have to constantly do clutch in, clutch out, clutch in, clutch out with a tiny pedal and, you know, knees that barely fit in the driver's seat to begin with. So pros and cons on that one. But this, the first tank I put in was 92 octane, but it did have 10% ethanol in it. So a little bit less energy dense. I was able to find 89 octane non-ethanol. I didn't realize that it was that these engines are actually just fine running 87, but they do prefer ethanol free. So I figured I'd rather go mechanical sympathy, find ethanol free. Unfortunately, I had to go out to the Aloha in Hawaii Kai because that was what was convenient while I was heading out to Makapu'u Point. And Hawaii Kai, if y'all don't know, is a very, very ritzy neighborhood. And so I paid $5.05 a gallon for that. Not pleasant, but when you're only buying 5.5 gallons, doesn't matter as much as it turns out. You can get gasoline for $3.99 a gallon if you know where to look on this island, but it's 87 and it has ethanol. So running ethanol free just because it's an old engine. I'm also running a can of Seafoam in it. I did a little, well, not quite a full can, but I did part of a can on the previous tank. I'm going to do a can of Seafoam on this tank. When I fired it up, when I got back from New York City, it was a big cloud of smoke coming out, which tells me that yes, the Seafoam did its job. Cleaned out a little bit of the fuel system. So, but ever since that, it was big puff of smoke and then it cleared out. Thought high gas prices were pleasant. I'd say they are. I mean, again, I'm not really affected. Turns out you can kind of charge whatever for gas prices if I'm only buying 5 of them at a time. I guess it technically, okay, fine. It was 5.7 gallons, so closer to 6. Sue me. I think the full size of the gas tank is somewhere between 6 and 10 gallons. I don't really know yet. I think it's closer to 6, but I'd rather not find out by topping it off because it's the way it's not a conventional, or it's this conventional fuel tank, but the fuel neck isn't the same as a lot of American cars, which means you don't get that auto shut off, and I don't like the idea of topping it off. I think that's super dangerous. So yes, I am a fan of high gas prices. So I paid $5 a gallon today. Cool. I'm happy to do it because I just don't use, as it turns out, again, when you're only driving maybe 3,000 miles a year, okay, it's 100 gallons of gas. Like over the course of a year, is that a big deal? No, not really. So that was the van. Went and did Makapu'u. Ended up having to run back because at 12, I went over to the YLI side neighborhood of Honolulu. And for the first time ever, I went to a dance class. For those of you who have been following along, you know, New Year's goals and such, one of my goals this year in the pursuit of excellence and or becoming a Renaissance man, a la Jacob Lundfisker of Early Retirement Extreme, someone I fancy quite a lot, is to learn how to dance because I don't know how to do it. We worked on tango, which is the dance I really want to learn the most. It's the Argentine variety. So definitely, you know, very new to it. I think I'll pick it up fairly quickly, and I definitely think I'm going to return. So they did like a 2-hour back-to-back class. First hour was for intro, second hour was for advanced. I left after the first hour because I think I'd rather take a couple more of that intro hour and then do a second hour where I can put it a bit more together. I've actually got some video, not of myself, but of the instructor. Holy crap, the dude is good. And it's, oh my God, okay. It doesn't matter who you are. Like, it's a situational alpha type thing where if you know how to dance and you can get a girl to come dance with you, or a guy if that's what you're into, it is such an alpha move to be able to do that and dance with confidence. So it's one of those, it's an arrow I would like to have in my quiver. Again, it also just makes me a more interesting, educated person. It's the same reason I'd like to learn more about architecture or learn more about art and theater. Why, when I was in New York, I went and saw an independent production play. I'm not a thespian, but I think specialization is for insects, and the way one pursues excellence, becomes a better human being, is to continue learning in a broad range of fields. Now, if you're very, very good at specializing, by all means, dive deep into that specialization, especially if it's economically profitable for you, but know enough skills outside of that to the point where you don't have to worry about that as much. So the tango class was a lot of fun. I'm not particularly light on my feet, as you would imagine, teaching Bull to dance. But I had a great time. We switched partners, so I was going with a bunch of girls and even a couple guys. I stayed lead the entire time because I'm new and don't know how to follow yet. Also because, look, if I'm going out and dancing, I'm not following, I'm leading. Let's just it's right. Argentina is a country that has a certain amount of machismo in it. Most Latin American countries are like that, but in particular, right, if you're male, especially a male of my size and stature, you're expected to lead, and I think I will. Now, someone who is good at leading is also very good at following, but I'm good at neither at the moment, so I'm going to start with leading, and maybe I'll come back to following. But ideally gonna keep working on learning how to tango. I think I'm gonna try and learn swing after that, because swing you can do to a little bit more modern music, not a ton of it, but for instance, I was at New York, my modeling director, they played at the after party, someone put on Night Fever by the Bee Gees, which I don't like disco, and I do like disco. I don't really like the Bee Gees, but situational alpha move. My modeling director just started taking girls and swinging with them. Just flawless, buttery smooth. Even the girls had no idea what he was doing, but they just kind of let him do it, spinning them around like they were ballerinas. Beautiful to watch. It's one of those things where you see that and you're like, okay, I am inferior to this person. I need to correct that. I need to get better. So it's motivating. So that was the first half of my day. I'd already burned 2,500 calories by lunch, which I came back here and had. It was just good old protes. Went ahead and made, I've got little red Italian bolognese sauce going on, simmering over there. I need to actually check it, make sure it's not boiling over. Went ahead and, that's why I was wearing my hat, I went and cut my hair. As usual, I need to trim up the back. I will do that later before I take a shower, but had to do that. Did laundry day, and I believe that is about all I've had the time to do today. Oh, I finished budgeting as well. So busy, very productive, very busy day, but altogether doing pretty well. Macro-wise, slipped up a bit with some cheese last night and had quite a lot of that same block of cheese or wedge of cheese earlier today, but I've burned so many calories that unless I eat like an absolute pig, which I won't tonight, probably, maybe, I don't know, should be okay. Okay, let me check the kind, and then that is starting to bubble. We're gonna let it come down a bit. There we go. Flavor's starting to melt. Could use a little bit more red pepper. I like my Italian red sauces spicy. Just an opinion of mine on that one. Anywho, so sorry about the very long introduction, but regarding tango dancing, was it fun? Oh yes, it was. Definitely really enjoyed that. So I'll go ahead and catch up on chats here real quick. Bo with an Aggie hat on. Yep. This is just what I happened to be wearing earlier. Again, I still love my Ags, but I don't like wasting time on them. It's harder. When I live in paradise and there's so much fun shit to do, it's just hard to piss away a Saturday waiting on them and getting emotionally invested in a team that is perpetually useless in football, and more promising but more heartbreaking in baseball especially, but also basketball. Ian B just did your taxes too today, and that's the perfect segue into the next segment. I'll capture all the other chats and catch up on that first. Mark Sabbath says the radical left. What about them? This is just the radical left. Okay. Midnight Vid says, hey, Ball, how's it going? It is going great. Today's been a fantastic day, a very busy one, but a very productive one, if you couldn't tell. Yesterday was quite a productive one as well because I did my taxes, or rather, did half of them, got the other half done, and I'll explain that. Big Red Fro talking about had to do my taxes early because Kentucky is doing a system update with their tax processing units. Very interesting, actually. Big Red, if you can tell us in chat, how Kentucky collects taxes. I assume it's income taxes, but if you have the numbers, I'd love to know what Kentucky's income tax brackets are, sales tax, and property taxes. Is your van a stick shift? No. Sub-oo. There will be funny meme decals coming. Our good friend Zepp is working on those. I actually have a ton of them here. I'm actually going to show off one just because they're really cool. One of my favorites is bull muscle, no bullshit. I have not had the time to get the car clean, and you don't apply decals to a dirty car because then the decals don't stick as well. So it's in the works. Probably, hopefully things go well enough tomorrow. I was actually supposed to go out and hit the beach with my modeling director today, but he got called into work, which is fine enough for me. I'm plenty of shit I need to do here anyway, so we're just good. There we go. Dear God, 31-year-old CVT. You do have to treat this thing with mechanical sympathy. Actually, at one point, the clutch temp got too hot. So because it's a CVT is basically a big system of pulleys and cables, for lack of a better term, or belts, instead of gears like a traditional transmission, which means it can be more efficient at given speeds, but for this car, you are screaming at high revs north of about 40 miles an hour, or 60 kph really. That's 37 miles an hour. At one point, I did hit 100. The van really does not like doing that. That's 100 kph or 60 miles an hour. I'm going to keep it below 55 as sort of a hard limit because it came with a really lumpy idle after that when I came down and hit a stoplight, and the car actually conked out. I was able to, turn the ignition off, or I turned it off, turned it back on, and it fired right up immediately. But what that tells me is at high speeds, that transmission is getting very hot. So no problem. Honestly, I just have to be aware that 60 is just not a speed that car likes to do. I say that 60 is actually 98 kilometers. I think I hit 105, just closer to 65. That K-Van is, I think, originally it topped out at 71. So I really, it was a kind of good stress test, but I'm definitely not going to push that engine that hard in the future. I'm going to keep it to, 80 kph is just fine, which is 50 miles an hour. And the nice thing about living in Hawaii is that with the exception of the H3, there really aren't that many roads that go faster than that. 60 is as fast. Yeah, so the H3 has a speed limit of 60, but you can go slower in the right lane. And in a 30-odd-year-old K-Van, like, people see K-Vans and they know, okay, that's not a fast vehicle, I'm gonna pass them. And as long as you're not an idiot and going into the left lane, you're fine. Anyway, I thought high gas prices were pleasant. I wouldn't say, okay, they're not pleasant, but I still want them because they're the most effective incentive to reduction of fuel consumption. High gas prices are good for the country, high gas prices are good for the economy, and high gas prices are good for the environment. All three. And yes, I do mean the US economy, because the US produces just about as much as it consumes, which means if gas prices go up, the United States gets more high-paying jobs in the oil and gas industry. So it does benefit the American economy nowadays for high fuel prices. It's not 1973 anymore. Imagine if the U.S. national gas prices reached $5 a gallon. I believe in 2022 they came awful close under Biden. Obviously, Biden did. The president does not control gas prices. I wish gas prices were higher. Out here in Hawaii, they're just kind of always high because the cost of importing the crude oil and the gasoline to do it is it's expensive. More dancing, getting rhythm. Sam Yee, we can hope. I would like to see it go that way, I would not put a ton of stock in me ever becoming a competition grade dancer, but I'd like to be good enough to where if I got invited to go to a dance, I wouldn't look like an absolute fool. Omega says, I dream of driving 3,000 miles a year, cover 3,000 miles in 2 months. Omega, you might want to write into me and maybe I can help unfuck your finances, because 3,000 miles in 2 months, using IRS mileage rates for a given car, that is about $1,800 in 2 months. In other words, you multiply that by 6, that's, yikes. You are looking at over $10,000 a year in driving costs alone. That's horrendous. Consider moving closer to the things you go to. In other words, work. Don't live far unless you have a really good economic reason to. Minimize your commute time. Commuting is time wasted unless you're doing it by a bicycle, in which case it's exercise, which we all need more of. Or if you're doing it by walking or running, but not many people do that. Let's see here. I do like how you take a cue to being inferior as someone to inspiration to improve yourself in the aspects in which you're inferior. Yes, so let's talk about that. Mr. Money Mustache has an excellent article about this, and it is, to get good at something, first you must admit that you suck. And I suck at dancing. But I don't have to keep sucking at dancing. I can improve, right? If you suck at dieting, you can make changes to improve. If you suck at the gym, you can go hit the gym to get better at it. If you suck at your finances, you can learn a little bit. And if you want me to be your teacher, you can write in to askbullmuscle@gmail.com. I'm going to keep fucking promoting this because I keep getting people who ask me questions in things like Instagram, things like Discord DMs, and while I appreciate that you're reaching out and asking me, it's unhelpful because trying to get more information and responses, right? When I get a consultation for a video request, I write things down in here. I write things in my notebook because that allows me to organize my thoughts and give you better advice as a result. Doing that with a bunch of Discord DMs makes it really, really hard to actually understand what's going on and track information. That's why I prefer emails. It also presents a small psychological cost to you, the viewer. Because it's slightly more difficult, not a ton, but just a tiny bit more effort to do it that way, you're more likely to be invested in the advice I give you, and therefore, it's the same reason I ask you to promote my stuff, and therefore, you're less likely to ignore it. Okay, so, little good advice there. What about the South Park meme? That may be one of the ones we're looking at. I think I'm going to stick with, I do like true discipline. It come from within. I think we're going to use that phrase. I'm gonna work on that one with Zepp a little bit because I do really I like the message too, because true discipline really does come from within. Self-control is a virtue and you work on it. Yes, 60s, let's see, and our actual Grand Governor, Dandy Andy, is lowering our income tax from 4% to 3.5%. So that's interesting. Our Governor, Josh Green here, credit where it's due, this is a Democrat in a very blue state doing this, is looking to lower income taxes by about 50% across the board over the next 6 years, from now to 2031. Do people ask you for silver bullet investment advice in DMs? Don't know what silver bullet investment advice is. You may have to clarify on that one. Pay my folks $500 a month for rent. Rent in the Burlington area is around $1,500. The Toyota RAV4, the 4-cylinder, get 28 to 30 mpg, spend $40 a week in gas. Okay, now that right here, this is an excellent question. So there's a really good article from Triple M called The True Cost of Commuting that you may want to take a look at and decide whether or not it is worth moving into Burlington. Burlington for $1,500, you can probably find a below average place that's still in pretty good shape. Granted, you may value being with your family more, so there's also that. But I may be able to help with that. Do other people ask you for silver investment advice in DMs? Hotshot stocks to get rich quick advice? Sometimes, but not as regularly as you might think. It's usually it's diet and fitness advice. Very little on the stocks so far, but I suspect that will change. If you really want to see one of the stocks I'm very bullish on, go look at my video on Re Automotive. They just did a concept one-off with a mobile ambulance company, like a mobile hospital company. I really do think Re has a very bright future. Okay, so let's get into the meat of the show, and that is going to be as inevitable as death. That is to say, keeping that off the screen. Taxes. You know them, you love them. If you're a socialist, I guess. But a couple things I learned this year about taxes, so this may be useful to some of y'all. First thing I learned was that if you lived in multiple states, in other words, if you moved, be very, very careful about which online tax prep service you choose to use for your taxes. I have, since Credit Karma Tax got merged into them a few years ago, used Cash App Tax and never had a problem with it. Credit Karma Tax I used in 2021 when I moved from, or I should say in early 2022 when I paid 2021's taxes because I had moved from Texas to South Carolina. At that time, Credit Karma Tax supported multiple state returns, even though, of course, Texas, no state income tax, so really it wasn't. Maybe that's why. But Cash App Tax does not. I didn't realize, what I thought was, okay, well, fine, I'll do my federal taxes with Cash App Tax and then do state only with another online filer. What I did not realize was that other online filers don't like that. You have to file either both federal and multiple states with them or none at all. So I said, fuck it, I'm not bothering with this. It's way too much of a headache to try and call Cash App, try and get my tax returns back. Forget it. I'm just going to go to H&R Block and pay someone to handle it this year. It's a one-off cost, and I know I don't have to worry about it. So yesterday, when I was down getting my key duplicated at a locksmith, because JDM vehicle means you can't just go to Home Depot and duplicate a key like that to a normal vehicle. I went to a nearby H&R Block. We got it done over the course of maybe, it was about 30 minutes at first, and they said, oh, we'll have an appointment for you in an hour. So I went over to a local grocery store, got some greens that I needed anyway, some beets, some Thai basil, which was nice, and then came back. We got it all done, and I have the numbers, so this is pretty good. I went to H&R Block. Yeah, this is one where I wouldn't normally recommend H&R or the paid tax prep services, but because, again, I basically put myself in a stupid situation, I should have been more aware and used Tax Slayer or something where you can do multiple state returns, but you have to file federal with them and then filed federal with them. Oh, well. Still, pretty good. I still need to, because it's state only, I need to mail in my returns, which I have in two envelopes sitting right off of screen. But, excuse me. I ended up paying about $130 for the total service because it was originally $75 per state return. I had two of them, but they gave me a discount, so it was like really $130 instead of $150. Federal refund, I got over $2,000 in returns this year, and Hawaii and South Carolina were $770 and $550 respectively. So pretty good. All together, we're talking well over $3,000 back. I knew due to moving that number would be kind of weird, and I'll explain a little bit more. Y'all know as a nuclear engineer that I make pretty good money. But I have a lot of really good ways on lowering my tax burden. The common theme here is that they are entirely dependent on being frugal. In other words, not spending money on shit you don't need to impress people you don't really like. Okay, So before revealing what my net tax rate was in federal income tax, and we can do the math on state and local, it's a little bit more complicated for them, but in effect, it's very, very low. What I'm going to do is explain. It's time to bring out Mr. Whiteboard. We all love Mr. Whiteboard. What you can do to lower your taxes in terms of frugality. The first thing that you can do, and I think most people know about this one, is the 401k. The 401k, first off, most companies that you might work for offer a match. They will offer to match your contribution 1 for 1 or 1 for 2. And if your company offers you a match, fucking take it. It's free money. That one is a no-brainer. So the first one is the 401k. You can put up to $2,000 or $23,500. I believe that's the number for 2024. Might be $22,500. It's around 23 grand in there. I will check my Discord because I actually have it pinned. I'm going to get this right rather than get it fast. Yep, it is. Oh, it's 23,000 for 2024. It's 23,500 for 2025. So next year it'll be 23,500. Okay. Next up, we have IRAs. In 2024, this number was 7,000, and in 2025, it will remain 7,000. So, with IRAs, you have two different options. The first is a traditional, the second is a Roth. I use the traditional IRA because I think I will make less income when I want to pull that money out, which means the benefits of a Roth don't particularly help me. A Roth may make more sense if you plan on being a high earner or if you believe tax rates will be higher in the future. I do believe tax rates will be higher in the future, but I also don't really trust the government with the Roth exemption, right? With the traditional exemption or the traditional tax benefit, I get that benefit today. With the Roth, the government could just as easily renege on their word about Roth IRAs. It would piss a lot of people off, but the government could do it, especially if we elected a far-left president. In general, I'm not a huge fan of socialists in office. There are some left-wing policies I have. When it comes to running the government in general, I'm more capitalist, a little bit more small government, especially when it comes to taxes. But, so, for traditional IRA though, boom, that's 7,000. So right off the top, if you fill these up, you've got $30,000 that is not going to get taxed by the feds. So if you make $80,000 a year, you've just lowered your taxable income from $80,000 to $50,000 in 2 fell swoops. Now, with an HSA, that's the third one. For individuals in 2024, you could put up to $4,150 into an HSA. An HSA is a health savings account. If you have what's called a high deductible health program, in other words, you're as close to self-insuring as you can with health insurance in the US, and the only thing your HSA or your healthcare plan covers is catastrophic expenses, your HSA becomes an investment account that you can use for qualified medical expenses. Or if you don't spend the money in your HSA account that you fund it with, it effectively turns into a normal IRA. So for me, because I keep myself fairly healthy, I minimize the number of trips to the doctor I take. Obviously I get that an HSA isn't for everyone, a high deductible plan isn't for everyone, but if you're otherwise a healthy individual, this is a plan worth considering. My employer, and some employers do this, will incentivize you to take an HSA plan. My employer gives me, I believe my old employer gave me $500 towards an HSA plan per year. My new one gives me, I want to say it's $1,000, which is terrific. So there we go. That's another $4,000 off. Now we're going to talk capital gains. Everybody's got an opinion about the capital gains tax. The capital gains tax is pretty good. A lot of people really like it. However, there is a clause that allows you to deduct capital losses as well, which, okay, fair enough, as long as you don't have a wash sale, and I'm not going to define wash sales and get into that here, but if you lose up to $3,000 in stock, buying and selling over the course of the year, you can report that and count that against your taxable income, which I do. So that's another $3,000 off. Now, eventually, this is not a long-term sustainable strategy because unless you're a massive idiot with your investments will go up over time. But this is really just a basic form of what's called tax loss harvesting. In other words, towards the end of the year, you sell your loser stocks just enough to where you can claim a write-off and delay paying more tax on your winnings into the future. And then finally, the standard deduction. So the standard deduction may not be applicable to some of y'all. Really depends on where you live or what house you have. So the standard deduction is $14,600 in 2024. So $14,600 if you have a huge mortgage and you pay a lot of mortgage interest in a year. You've got a high rate on a large house that is worth a lot, or it's in a high area. Let's say you're a homeowner here in Hawaii, for instance. So if you've got $1 million home, you may be paying more in mortgage interest than this number. And if that's the case, the standard deduction may not be something you'd want to do. You may want to itemize instead. I just take the standard deduction because I pay rent and my house is very low mortgage interest. So we add this up, all these deductions. If you were to maximize all of these, you'd be at $23,000, $30,000, $34,150, $37,150, $51,750 big ones. In other words, you can shield $50,000 away from Uncle Sam's grubby little hands pretty much every year if you're clever about it. So if you're making $100,000, you can cut the amount of taxable income you have to pay in half. That's fucking huge. And you can imagine that's what I did. My effective taxable income this year was about $43,000. So federal tax brackets, you have the first is the 10% and the second is the 12%. To me, the golden threshold, ENB says, is getting your taxable income down to the 12% bracket. You better believe I did that. Anything below $47,000 a year is in that bracket. The nice thing too, by the way, with this little IRA strat, a traditional IRA, is that you can start doing Roth conversions later in life, converting your traditional to a Roth, but you have to pay tax on it at that point. However, what if you just don't make any money for a year and then you do $40,000 worth of Roth tax conversions? Well, if it's all profit, it's going to be capital gains profits. So you convert $40,000 worth of profits, which is taxed long-term at a 0.0% rate. In other words, fuck you, I'm not paying taxes, and I can do it legally. This is what smart people do with their money. Other smart people do things with S-corps or LLCs or business deductions that are beyond the scope of this rather simple video. And then, yes, some states do have Roth conversion taxes and other things like that. Generally speaking, if you can choose a residency, don't choose a residency in a high tax state that does stupid shit like that. Maryland. I have bad things to say about the old line state, and taxes are a big part of why. Maryland and Virginia especially, those two are police states. Anyway, where this all works out to is that my net effective tax rate was roughly, including the federal refund, worked out to about 8%. So you factor in FICA, that's Social Security and Medicare, which is, let me check my budgeting software here, about another 1 to 2%. And then state and local is about another 1 to 2. My net taxes for the year will be somewhere around the ballpark of It looks like 11%. That's pretty good. Considering, again, I make a six-figure salary, okay? I make six-figure money. I'm a nuclear engineer, right? Well, okay, fine. I'm a radiological engineer if you really want to split hairs. But you make nuclear engineering money and you still pay barely over 10% of your income in taxes. What that's called is the position of fuck you. And the best part is, all of this, you can invest these first three items. In other words, this can grow at 7% a year on average for the next 40 years. So there you go, $51,750. That, my friends, is how you take a $100,000 income a year and pay less than 10% federal income tax on it. Because fuck you, IRS. It's a game to me. No, it's totally legal. What I just told you was 100% legal. But because the average savings rate in this country is a pathetic 4% of people's paychecks, nobody does this. But the minimum amount of money people can live on in Hawaii is $100,000. And you see all these stupid articles. Except for that, I know people who are working class in Hawaii and make $40,000 a year and survive. So it can clearly be done. Excuse me, I'm going on a rant. I need more water. The point that I'm making here is very, very simple, okay? If you don't like paying taxes, be more frugal. Uncle Sam actually rather wisely gives massive tax breaks to people who are good with money. If you're good with money, it's a life skill that benefits you a lot. Knowing what the fuck to do with money is a huge, huge benefit. All right, I'm gonna go check the pasta sauce. Give me 1 second. Perfect. Oh, my laundry is just about finished. That's fine. It can sit in the dryer for all I care. But the whole point here, again, if you're frugal, the frugality gives you so many benefits. Getting the position of fuck you at an employer, not needing to worry about paycheck to paycheck stresses, being able to choose your job a lot from a lot wider options, being able to choose where you live, much wider range of options, being able to retire earlier. But a very underrated one is paying less taxes. Let's catch up on comments. Finances are doing okay, but set aside money as a discretionary spending money. Took a while proper budgeting and writing everything down. Well, you're already ahead of 90% of people then, Omega. I'm thriving. If you ever want personalized audit or detailed analysis of your finances, write to me, askbillmuscle@gmail.com. Planning to trade in the RAV4 for a Camry Hybrid. Will never say no to 50 mpg. Camry Hybrid is an excellent car. If you don't need the space, you can look at a Corolla for a little bit less, or even a Prius. The new Prius or Prii are very, very nice cars. The older ones are still very efficient, although hideous to look at. The old Prius Vs from about 10 years ago, if you can find those are excellent in terms of, they are cavernous on the inside and not quite 50 miles per gallon, but 45 with very, very good reliability. EMB says, just don't take out a loan to buy it. Absolutely, do not finance depreciating assets. That is one of the most basic rules of personal finance. 3 things to keep a man chained to his cube. In no particular order are expensive houses, expensive cars, and expensive women. Simple as. I do 2, if not 3 of those 4. Yeah, we've talked about your situation, and it totally makes sense why you wouldn't do the 3rd one. But 2 out of 3 ain't bad here, especially when one of them is the 401k and that, well, yours is a 403b, but still, it's the same effective thing. I mean, the amount of money you could save doing that is tremendous. Max out pre-tax cont to the IRA every year. Yep. I'm in the 12% bracket as well, right? The difference is, I think, between the 3 of us, you Omega, me, and ENB, I think I make substantially more money. Not trying to flex, but I think I make substantially more money than either of you, but I still pay about the same in taxes because I take all that extra money and save it. I don't spend it. Anyway, don't have to pay taxes on Roth conversions at the state level where I live. Yeah, so I already talked about that. It can be done. It's not the most fun, but it is doable. Absolutely. Since my gross income is 12% bracket anyway, you are underpaid. ENB, keep working hard, bust ass, and start looking for other. We've talked about that. Your salary is going to go up. That grows at 7% a year. Very nice. Okay. So that will allow me to transition to the next topic, which is that of diversifying income streams. I'm not going to talk a ton about this in particular, but suffice it to say that I'm a huge boglehead. For those of you who know what being a boglehead is, that is someone who likes low-cost investment funds, championed by Jack Bogle, the first CEO and founder of Vanguard, which is now one of the largest investment brokerages in the world. So, Jack Bogle recommends, again, just basic, things like VTI or VTSAX if you prefer the Admiral Fund version. One of my friends is trying to find my channel and having issues. Anyway, I am a huge fan of this as well, but I do like the idea of some amounts of diversification. One way to do this is real estate. You can either buy a house and rent it out, or house hack, which is buying a house, living in it, and renting out a room. There are loads of other combinations. Or you could buy REITs, or REITs, which is basically it's a special type of company, or real estate investment trust is what it stands for, that works towards the idea of, they're basically corporate landlords, right? Take, I don't know, a warehouse that Amazon decides to use for a year, or Walmart decides to use for a year. Amazon or Walmart could, but usually don't choose to buy those outright. A lot of the time, they'll rent it, and they'll rent it from a REIT. A REIT usually owns that. And warehouses are just one example. Excuse me, I just got something tickling my throat. I've got a coconut water and actually I want to show you all that. While I was at the Tango studio, one of them very nicely has a lime tree on their property. And I know this looks like a lemon. I promise you it's not. This is a lime. It is a local Hawaiian cultivar, I guess. I've got a coconut water, and I think what I'm going to do is slice it up and make something nice out of that. That, or maybe I'll throw the lime into a smoothie with some pineapple, the beet, and the carrot. That might be very good. Temptations. I'll figure out what I'm going to do with it, but it's going to be tasty no matter what. So, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, with the diversification. So you can use REITs as a way to do it. You can own property and then pay, get paid by a tenant, or you can own property, live in it, and rent out a room. I will say, this is one where the politics really matter. Do not pick a locality where property taxes can keep going up. I'm not trying to get political, but these do tend to be liberal cities that jack up local property taxes. And when I say liberal cities, I'm not necessarily gonna, pigeonhole the ones you might think. San Francisco actually doesn't do this. One of them that has done this a lot recently is Minneapolis. Minneapolis is pricing out a lot of mom and pop landowners by doing that, by jacking up tax rates. Another city that almost infamously did this was Detroit. Upon all that urban flight, right, because of a lot of urban flight, Detroit had to tax their remaining tax base a lot heavier, which means you got to the point where, especially in the early 2010s when Detroit was kind of hitting its nadir, you would have properties that you could buy for $20, but then you'd have to pay $20,000 in back taxes. This is not an optimal way to allocate housing stock. So this is one where when it comes to liberal cities, and I live in one, I live in Honolulu, I would give a word of caution to left-wing cities that want to jack up property taxes. You do it too much too often, you can cause people to exit your city, concentrate the landlord class among extremely wealthy people who can just pay the tax at whatever rate, or corporations. And a lot of people, very rightfully so, have some angst about that. So if you want to keep having mom and pop kind of landlords, be very careful with how much you charge in property taxes. I personally would not own property in Hawaii, not because the taxes are unreasonable. In fact, property taxes are very reasonable here for what they are, but because the prices are so high that to actually get through all of those taxes, or to actually even pay the taxes on it, would still be immense amount of money just because it's worth so much. And it would, if I were to buy a house or even just a condo here in Hawaii, it would make up a huge amount of my net worth. I would effectively make myself house poor. So for that reason, you know, if you're going to buy, I recommend, if you're going to buy a house property as an investment, I recommend looking at capex rates and consider fixer-uppers if you live in a higher cost of living area and you're handy with tools and carpentry work. That you are actually adding value to a community. You're taking a rundown, dilapidated house, you are improving it, and then you're putting it back on the market for higher rent. That is very, very good for a city's health in the long run. Can you actually afford property in Hawaii right now? I could. If I wanted to liquidate a lot of my investments, I could probably certainly put a down payment on a mortgage, but could even put, my net worth is high enough to buy some property in Hawaii outright. I'm not quite a millionaire if you're really looking for where I'm at, but in general, I would say, don't, I don't like to give people who are on, I don't like to give the YouTube channel an exact number because I think that's vulgar. But, you know, if you ask, I'll tell y'all in my Discord channel. But I'm doing well enough to where I'm financially independent. I'll put it that way. A couple other ways you can diversify are with bonds or loans. So, dividend stocks and bonds. Perfect transition. Thank you very much, Mr. ENB. You know, I'll talk about covered calls first. So covered calls are a way of limiting your upside potential on certain stocks, but getting effectively a good return on investment. I've played around with covered calls. You can make them work in a theta gang style, but very few theta gangers end up just beating standard buy and hold advice. We'll see if the future changes that. I think there's something to be said, there's a satisfaction too to be said for selling options that expire worthless and then taunting degenerates at Wall Street. That's about it. It's a fun, that's for fun more than anything else. You can make a good return on that, but you can also get your nuts clapped if that covered call goes, you know, through the roof. So what else do we got? Dividend stocks. I mean, the whole point of owning stock is that you're either getting a dividend or you will be receiving one in the future, and the company's not paying it only to increase its size, which is called a growth stock. You know, for instance, a good example of this was, you know, 30 years ago, Apple was a growth stock. They weren't paying dividends. Now, Apple, if they wanted to, could afford to pay a nice fat dividend, and that's why their valuation's higher, as an example. So dividend stocks is not a bad option. Bonds are basically loans you give companies, municipalities, or governments. You get a return rate on them, and you usually get a maturity date. The problem I have with bonds right now is that they are just barely above inflation, and to get a decent return comparable to that of stocks, you have to look in the junk bond territory, at which point the risk profile is no better than stocks in the first place. So I'm not a huge fan of bonds. However, I am a huge fan of personal loans. Personal loans effectively work the same way as bonds do. You loan out money to people you trust, be it for business or for some other reason. And then you set up, you define the interest rate, you define the payback period, whether or not you want to give them just minimums they can pay back the principal as they feel, or you say, you know, I want this paid back by, I don't know, December 31st, 2029. You know, that's just a little bit under 5 years. You can do either or. Obviously, the big banks and governments really don't like it when you do this, but it's legal and there's nothing they can really do about it. Always practice OPM. Absolutely, Mr. Luminary Sovereign. So that's pretty good analysis of it for all of those. I'm a huge fan of personal loans too, because you have a better judgment of character for whoever is asking you for money than the bank does. If you have to be very careful and you have to be willing to say no, even if it damages a relationship, but you know, if they're looking to start a business, their business plan looks good, or if you believe in them enough to where even if the business plan fails, they'll pay you back, you can go that route. We'll see how it goes. It's not a huge amount, but it's a good little toe in the water. We'll put it that way. Luminary Sovereign says, can you afford property in Hawaii right now? Not really. If I really wanted to, I could, but then I'd be house poor. And I think right now the entire country is basically in a housing bubble. I do have property in South Carolina where housing costs are much more reasonable. I'm renting it out and I'm making a healthy return. Will I hold on to it forever? Probably not, but at 2.375% interest, I have absolutely no incentive to sell it any faster than I need to. My current tenant does want to buy it, but thanks to the magic of the modern American divorce courts, he's having a hard time getting the down payment scraped up. So that's really, you know, a choice he wants to make. Luminary Sovereign, I'm a woman. Oh, well, welcome on in. That's surprising, actually. Usually we don't have too many women around here. Welcome. Ekomomai. Good to have you. But yeah, he got absolutely screwed in divorce court, and so he's paying alimony, and that's inhibiting his ability to make the down payment and buy the house. Frankly, at current interest rates, he kind of doesn't want to anyway. He wants to wait for interest rates to come down, and I'm more than happy to do that because, again, inflation right now is hovering right at around 3%. Well, if I'm paying 2.375, I'm basically getting paid to borrow money. Now, the loan itself isn't very large because, well, it's a home in part of South Carolina, but still, you know, it works pretty well. ENB quoting one of my favorite movies, The Gambler there. Don't buy a house. Let the landlord worry about fixing the fucking toilets. Rent yourself a nice place. That's your solace of fortune, Skibby. That puts you at a level for the rest of your life at fuck you. Yeah, I love that movie. Or rather, even J.L. Collins' interpretation of that particular one. But guess it doesn't matter, though. So you said, Mister, I just want to let you know. No, thank you. Yeah, no, it doesn't ultimately matter. But no, it's a bit unfortunate that the reality of most online sites is that the majority of people you interact with are men. It shouldn't be like that, but statistically speaking, it is. So I've just kind of gone with that. But good to know, Miss Luminary Sovereign. Thank you very much, or Mrs., depending on if you're married. But I'm not going to figure that one out. I'm going to go with Miss until informed otherwise. But very nice to have you. You've become fairly common here too, which I enjoy. It's nice having a little bit more diverse variety of audiences. But would I buy property again? After owning the one I have, it's been a great investment, but no, absolutely not. I am a transient person by nature. The odds that I stay in one place for any given amount of time are just not very high. I'm always looking out for better deals. I may end up staying in this apartment, not this apartment, this apartment complex, moving into a smaller studio in the future, or I may go back the roommates route and see if I can't save myself some money there. If I were to do that and go back to the roommates route, my expenses would drop below $30,000 a year out here in Hawaii with catastrophically high food prices, the country's highest fuel prices, the country's highest housing prices. I'm just saying, maybe there's some smarter ways to save. It can be done, right? Think about it. Supply and demand. Housing is a very scarce good in the island of Oahu. So you should buy less of it, or you should rent less of it. That means go for a studio instead of a 1-bed. Go for a 2-bed house instead of a 3-bed house. Go for, I don't know, excuse me. Go for look at roommates. There are ways of doing it. Just missed, not married. Yeah, fair enough. You're in DC. Funny enough, apparently, this is what I've heard from the dating scene, and I do offer dating advice, right? I will say I've mostly avoided the dating market, but at the same time, right, I'm a runway model with a 6-pack, and I'm 6'3", so I got a fair amount going for me on that front. Not to be immodest, but when it comes to dating, unfortunately, Luminary, it's interesting because I have a couple other female friends in and around the DC metro area, and they have told me that is the one place where the dating market appears to be a lot of high value female people looking to date, and the quality of men isn't very good. And it's not that men in DC can't bring in big income or are upwardly mobile. It's DC. Everybody's upwardly mobile. Everybody's scheming for power. Everybody's looking for that next step. Ambition runs deep in DC, perhaps more in DC than any other town than maybe New York City or Los Angeles. But let's see. But it seems as though, from my other friends' experience, guys in DC are pretty flighty, maybe is the right way to say it. They're very commitment phobic, and they're always looking for something better, it's very interesting to me because DC, right, and I'm not saying it's a 1-to-1 correlation, but higher education rates, lower obesity rates, and higher income levels tend to correlate with higher quality men and women. And in DC is one of the top towns for women's achievement in terms of those 3 items, right? Education, obesity, and income. So usually, again, it's not always, you can't reduce everything to statistics, but in general, DC is a town with a higher supply of higher quality women, and perhaps maybe not a lower supply of higher quality men, but maybe a lower supply of higher quality men willing to settle down or that want to settle down. So I sympathize with you on that one. Here out in Honolulu, if I really wanted to do more dating, I probably could. I've met a couple girls out here, met a couple guys too. We'll see if there's anything that comes of those. But after doing New York Fashion Week, oh God, it's quite fun to have supermodels drooling over you, hanging on either shoulder. I gotta be honest with you. People in DC are just flaky, period. Yeah, that's probably true. Women in DC probably aren't a lot better. But this is just what I'm hearing from quote unquote agents in the field, as it were. The 3-bedroom homes are so difficult to sell. I don't think so. I think 3-bedroom homes are, in the US anyway, the very standard starter home. I hate that term. My house in South Carolina is a 3-bed. I think 3-bed 1-baths are harder to sell than 3-bed 2-baths. That's really the extent of my knowledge. You got it right the first time. Yeah, guys in DC are just flaky. Yeah, that's not me getting it right. That's me listening to what some other friends in and around the DC metro area who happen to be women have told me. Or actually, for that matter, who happen to be women or gay men. I don't know, I would say Honolulu probably isn't like that. I will say, if you are looking for, this is just dating observation here, and now that I'm done the financial stuff, we'll move on to doing something other than just smithing. I think it's mostly because everyone's so busy here. Yes, and again, everyone's constantly very focused on moving upward. I think really a lot of relationships, they try to be power couples and maybe they fizzle out for that reason. Out here in Honolulu, I will say if you are into Asians, this city kicks ass. And that is not me trying to be offensive. That is a statistical proof because Hawaii is the only plurality Asian state. White people, haoles, myself, we are a minority. So it's very interesting to get that experience, I guess, is what I would say. Go Ami of Strength. We're gonna suit up. Hell yeah, I like the plate skirt. I do have some Scottish ancestry in my blood, and it's the closest thing you can get to a kilt. Kilts are fucking badass. Free the fellas. Ventilation, there, that's why I like it. If you don't understand what I'm referencing here, that's more of a you problem and not a me problem, but anywho. Let's grab some fish. Actually, what were we killing? Because we had the, what is it? The skull scepter, which is right. No, that's the accursed scepter. I need to find the skull scepter. I had it. There it is. Skull scepter imbued. Got some bone fragments, and then yeah, you go kill some spiders or something. Boop. Yeah, we'll do that. Where are my fish? There they are. Oh shit, we got lobbies in here? Fuck yeah. Now we'll just take pikes. Clear out an inventory space. That'll work. Oh wait. Invoke. Whee! Boom! Skull Scepter takes us right there. Kilts are awesome. Scotland! Yes. Based. I guess I really should go kill the flesh crawlers instead, because the flesh crawlers will give me more bone fragments. I think I'm gonna go down to the 3rd level and kill some, yes. Kill some of the spiders first, get rid of some of these pikes, and then go for it. Never mind, I think I got it. What'd you get? Here, I'm gonna go ahead and expand that a bit. The pestilence room. Alright, spiders. Okay, fine. Train a little defense. I do want to get it to 60. That'd be nice. And yes, I am wearing a ridiculous 32 kilogram gold helmet because that offers absolutely no protection. Why? Because fashionscape. There we go. Damn, they're chewing me up pretty quick. That's actually good though. We'll go kill the flesh crawlers after this. The flesh crawlers will give me bone fragments, which I can use to recharge the scepter, which is just kind of nice in general. Yeah, the gold helmet, this is entirely as a flex. There's no other reason that I would do that. Yeah, but I will say, New York Fashion Week, I had some gorgeous models. Frankly, both male and female. Like, just beautiful people all together surrounding me. It was a good time. I cannot complain. I forgot how you can kind of just do this automatically. I forgot that you can turn auto retaliate on, and the spiders stay aggressive, so we can just chill and talk for a bit. So you know what? I kind of have to pee, so I'm gonna go do that. Give me a moment. We'll check the sauce again too. Oh, this one's interesting too. Let's talk about that. Go ahead and insert the wall bit. Nice. Okay. This is a good example for people who are interested in weight loss to learn from. Let's see, another pike. The amount of water that you can fluctuate day to day is pretty crazy. I've lost and gained more than 10 pounds in the same day, just from mostly water weight. I was floating around 220 when I got back to Hawaii from New York, and I had a luau that I went to, put me up to 224. Then I dropped all the way down today after lifting, hiking, and then dancing, went all the way down to 214. So there's you can get big swings just from water weight. So it's one thing, if you're on a weight loss or even weight gain program, take note of when you're weighing yourself and try to do so consistently. Should come. DC absolutely is beautiful during the cherry blossom. So I've spent a fair amount of time in DC. I graduated from a high school in the People's Republic of Maryland. I despise the outer suburbs, to be honest with you, but DC itself I love. I'm a huge fan of the Washington Capitals and Washington Nationals. Now that Dan Snyder has sold the team, maybe I'll start caring about the Commanders again. Maybe. But it's pretty... And then, the Wizards... Until the Wizards change their name back to the Bullets, I'm not going to care about. They're cursed. I'm convinced of that. There is nothing that will think me otherwise. Maybe not for the next 4 years. Things are a bit crazy right now with President Elon. Actually, you're talking about extremely high housing prices, Luminary, but this is a great example. Because Trump and Doge are looking at making massive, and in my opinion, at least in some areas, very, very... Oh, hang on. Yes. Let's go to the graves. 100%. I like Leo, because usually you get an XP lamp for doing this. Because Trump and... Elon Musk and Vivek are working on this Doge thing where they're cutting a large chunk of federal workforces. I actually got offered myself as a federal worker that fork in the road, which is basically, hey, we're offering you 6 months severance pay if you quit. I was heavily considering it, honestly. All right, who's this? This is the pickaxe, this is the miner, that's the woodcutter, that's gardener, chef, potter, miner. But because of that, prices in DC housing have started falling, and it's to the point where prices for the first time in years in DC are starting to go for housing prices are going for under asking, because a lot of people are they're either quitting or getting laid off from the government, or something like that, and as a result, the amount of people who are causing housing demand in DC is starting to go down. I think that's well overdue for DC. DC needs a correction in the housing market anyway. So, Luminary, whether or not you like Trump or Elon, that is a bit of a silver lining. I'll put it that way. So, if you're suffering from high housing prices in DC, it may well be that the cuts to the federal government Trump and Elon are making, which, by the way, are going to be 1% to 2% of the whole total federal workforce at most. So keep it in context. It may end up working to your advantage in some ways. I think I finished. Taking care of them. Reward. Nice. Thank you very much, Leo. Should give me an XP lamp. Yes, it did. Lovely. But yeah, as for... Yeah, I heard a lot of people didn't trust it. They didn't. I was on the fence when the deadline occurred while I was in New York Fashion Week, so I was like, I don't know how big this modeling thing's going to get yet. If they offer it again next year, and I think they should keep offering it every year like this for the next 4, I would say I would very much consider. I'm getting just to that point where I like my job, so it's not that, but I really don't need the money that badly. I'm, again, as near as makes no difference, able to support myself on other passive income streams. I have that much invested, and I'm very good at not spending money. Again, if you can figure out how to live in Hawaii for under, $40,000 or even $30,000 a year, clearly you're doing something right. my house is paid already. Okay, so you're established. You have roots in the area then. Now, if you're able to afford it, you've got a paid off house in DC, you are sitting pretty. And even if the housing market cools off a bit, you're going to be just fine. But good for you. If you've got a paid off house in the DC metro area, you're doing just fine. I will say there are a few things I really like that Trump has done so far, and a few things I really dislike that Trump has done so far. I don't know, Luminary, I believe you, Omega, and ENB are the only people in the stream right now, so I don't know if you've seen the video where I did like political compass tests or anything like that. I'm something of a centrist. There are some opinions I have that are right-wing and some that are left-wing, but in general, I'm not one of these straight party voters. Really, it's almost 4% of the federal workforce and just 3%. That is fantastic. That's wonderful news. Their goal is 5 to 10%. Inshallah, baby. It needs to happen. Frankly, I could absolutely make some arguments for some people I know at work. Hell, even myself included. But then I'm still only 9 months into this job, so I'm still getting a lot of qualifications. So I'm not really providing a ton of value because I'm not fully trained yet. But I could make the argument. But to do that, you need to get rid of some of the red tape burden around what I do for a living, which again really should be done anyway. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of reducing the size of the federal government. There are some areas where I wouldn't do it. One thing I would do immediately is cut federal highway spending and keep federal spending towards trains and bikes, because that's actually a good idea. But start introducing toll roads. Make people make rational economic decisions. Another one I would do, and this is actually the rare tax hike I would approve of, is I would increase taxes on gasoline. We have not increased federal fuel taxes in the United States since Bill Clinton's first year in office, 1993. So I'm a huge fan of shrinking the size of the federal government. We need that. The U.S. government, and the reason I can say that is historical. Yes, these are people's lives, but they can find other jobs. The unemployment rate is very low right now, almost historically low. I mean, I will give credit to the Biden administration. It's unemployment over the last few years is about as low as it's been since the late 60s. It actually can be a good thing to put people out of jobs because it can cut inflation. But there are some other economic reasons behind that. But when it comes to, I don't trust Judge because using them as a Y-hander when all they need is a scalpel. I'm not sure about that, man. There is, and I see it every single day at my job, there is a lot of bloat and waste in all forms of government, but especially the federal government. As for putting people out of work, again, the private sector in this country is doing very well. They have been hiring, and especially if this causes, I think this country actually is a bit overdue for a minor recession, in the sense that what kills inflation? Truly kills inflation? Recession, every single time. 1970s, we had really high inflation. We got Paul Volcker in there, one of the best appointments President Carter ever made, into the Federal Reserve, and credit to Ronald Reagan for letting him do what needed to be done. Volcker jacked up interest rates, which caused a slowdown in the economy, but finally slayed the inflation demon. It had to be done. Keeping inflation at high levels like that is very, very dangerous. It's playing with fire. Over 60% of the federal workforce will be eligible to retire in 2026. They don't need to fire people, just stop hiring. Well, so that fork in the road program is basically that in a nutshell. There are not that many white-collar jobs available. Yes, but there have never been more blue-collar jobs, and there is nothing shameful or wrong about going and being an electrician or a plumber. There's nothing wrong about that. In fact, we need to be encouraging more of our young minds out there to look at those skilled blue-collar jobs, because those are the ones that can't be taken over by AI. AI is going to come, whether or not we like it. It's inevitable. Technology's progress is inevitable. We can't sit here and try and be Luddites. AI is going to automate a lot of existing white-collar jobs. It's unfortunate for the people who are going to be affected by it, but it is economic reality. You're an accountant and an economist? Nice. All right. I have a side hobby of the dismal science, actually. I read a fair amount of economics textbooks in my spare time just because I find it to be an interesting subject. I've read, over the last few months, I read Keynes's General Theory on Money, Interest, and Employment. I read Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson, which I very much enjoyed that book. And I just recently finished Knowledge and Decisions by Thomas Sowell. I would say I don't necessarily agree with everything Sowell has to say. However, I appreciate his perspective on things. Eventually, I am going to dive into the hellscape that is socialist economist books. I just don't want to yet. When it comes to economics in general, again, I tend to skew right-wing. There is a much smarter way. Yes, I would agree with that. The trouble is when you do things with a scalpel, and I've seen this happen too. Government is very, very good, and in general, it's not really government, but it's bureaucracy in general. This can be corporate, it can be government. It can be very good at subverting public will or popular opinion, right? Donald Trump won the election by a pretty serious margin. So people wanted this. And government has a way of, and the bureaucracy has a way of subverting the public opinion by slowing down progress to a crawl. You can see this with public transit projects, for instance, when, like California high-speed rail, a lot of NIMBYs out there have drastically slowed down the process, asking for unnecessary and unwarranted environmental reviews to slow down the high-speed rail project that they didn't want. This has happened here in Honolulu with the Skyline, right? One of the nice things about DC's metro system is that in the 1970s, we didn't have near as much of that bureaucracy in place. As a result, it got built faster and cheaper. You can't take the federal workers who have been doing their job for 20 plus years and tell them to go be a plumber. That is true. However, you can tell them to start looking for other lines of work. Maybe that means they do need to retrain. There are, when there are layoffs in the private sector workers that need to retrain. Government workers shouldn't be special in that regard. However, I think most government workers are pretty qualified people. I'm not going to play into the stereotype that all government workers are just lazy pieces of shit, because they're not. I think that's a very toxic stereotype the right likes to dabble in. But at the same time, they shouldn't be insulated. And I think in a lot of ways, federal workers, especially over the pandemic, have been coddled and insulated. I am a huge fan of telework, by the way. I think Elon especially has it dead wrong on telework. One of the greatest ways to reduce, for instance, spending on highway infrastructure is to get less traffic on the roads. How do you do that? Telework. So I am pro telework in general. There is a case in some selective parts where in-person meetings and offices are necessary. But I think, again, as time goes on, telework is like AI. I think it's inevitable. All right, so we are just about out here, so we're no longer getting them auto-attacking. Need some research on how many votes are disqualified from this election. Oh, do you believe that the 2024 election was stolen or otherwise rigged? Is that what you're saying? I mean, Trump won a lot of states that he didn't in 2020 or 2016, for that matter. And yes, I'm aware that Trump did not win the popular vote in 2016. I'm also one of these people that think the people who, right, the 2020 election was legitimate. The 2024 election was legitimate. I really don't like the idea of playing into this election was rigged or somehow otherwise not okay, not legitimate. I think that discourse is overall not only just toxic but unproductive, because there's nothing you, I, or anyone else can do to really change that fact. Let's see. What skill are we gonna update on this? We gotta go with rune crafting. Rune crafting is just so fucking slow. Nice. Where were we? We're gonna go get some flesh crawlers. So where would they be? Probably over here somewhere. Is Zombies. See, those are good high-level flesh crawlers. We want one where it's just flesh crawlers. We don't want to deal with zombies. Actually, we could. There's nothing wrong with dealing with zombies. Yeah, we'll go in here. If you'd like to tell me how many votes were disqualified in this election, I'm game to hear it. I'm willing to listen to those arguments, but I have a very hard time believing that this election was any more rigged than any other election in the U.S. history. If you really want to talk about shady fucking backroom shit that U.S. elections have had, let's talk all day about Samuel Tilden and Rutherford Hayes in 1876, because that is by far and away the worst election this country's ever had, because it condemned black people to 90 years of Jim Crow. Very simple. Federal workers should be insulted. I think you mean insulated. The whole reason you become a federal worker is because you want to do something for your country. No, it's not. The whole reason a lot of people become federal workers, okay, and job security. Yes, a lot of people do it for that latter reason, because they want to goof off on the job and not be fired. I've seen these people at work. I've worked with in the past some of them. It's very sad, but it happens more often than you'd like to. And maybe you are a federal worker, and maybe you've seen a different perspective of it, but it's pretty disheartening to see a lot of it. Now, there are, again, a lot of really smart, really talented, and really hardworking federal workers out there, but there is a culture of rot within some federal departments. I'll put it that way. There are frankly some federal departments that really don't have a good reason to exist. We actually there is a lot of fat in the federal government budget that can be taken out, and we haven't really cut the fat in a long time. Again, I would if I was gonna start cutting budgets. First off, all of this is an academic exercise. The only way to truly fix the national debt is to do something that, mathematically speaking, should have been done decades ago, probably in the 60s, which was tie the Social Security and Medicare age to life expectancy. A lot of conservatives want to privatize Social Security and Medicare. I don't think that's a good idea. However, the retirement age staying 65, or if he's crept up to 66, 67 right now, when life expectancy is now 79, that math just doesn't work. Social Security was never intended to be like that. In the 1930s, when the program was introduced, the retirement age was 62, but life expectancy was 59. I mean, you're a contractor. Look at how many, it's very eye-opening. Okay. Ooh, a beer. Nice. Speaking of, man, I could go for a beer. Non-alcoholic would be good. There are a lot of great, and you could say that about anything, but in my experiences, I have seen a tremendous amount of bad federal workers. I think the ratio is bad enough to where cutting 5 to 10% of them is not going to do too much damage. Just like in the private sector. That's true. You could probably cut 5 to 10% of the private sector and be okay. I think the private sector is more willing to do that sometimes. I'm not one of these, again. I am a capitalist in general, but I'm not going to sit here and fellate the free market as the ultimate solution, end all be all to everything. I acknowledge that things like the tragedy of the commons exist, that you have goods with negative externalities that, if left to the hands of the free market alone, causes a suboptimal outcome. Pollution is a very good example of this. You do want a governmental oversight to disincentivize pollution. However, a great example of government waste is cap and trade systems. A simple, flat carbon tax is far more effective at disincentivizing pollution and costs far less in terms of money and manpower to administrate than a bureaucracy based around cap and trade. Canada has done this multiple times with cap and trade. European countries haven't. Even for a while, California did, and it's just wasted. It's wasted money on make work in a lot of cases. But I like your perspective on this, Luminary. This is very interesting. I think we have some differences in the way we see things because of our own experiences, and those are the most rewarding conversations to have, because new experiences from different people give you a new perspective on the world. It's very easy to find a group of like-minded individuals and not want to meet new people who might challenge your views on something. For me, one of the nice things is that I have lived, before this, I lived in rural South Carolina, which, hell, my old town of Jackson voted 95% for Trump, okay? So it's that kind of conservative. By the way, for those of you who are wondering, I did not vote for Donald J. Trump in 2016, 2020, or 2024. I did not vote for Kamala Harris in 2024 either. I voted for Chase Oliver. While I did not think Mr. Oliver was a necessarily great candidate for president, after watching him make Georgians endure through 6 more weeks of Herschel Walker and hearing all that complaining about it at work, just beautiful. I love him for that just alone, because those were the years where Georgia was winning national championships in football. They were getting a bit too uppity, so I liked watching Georgians suffer with listening to Herschel Walker for 6 extra weeks, thanks to him. You have to be extremely careful cutting the defense budget. The U.S. military, Department of Defense, has failed 3 consecutive audits. There is plenty to cut. Again, I'm a nuclear engineer in Hawaii. There's really only one job and one location that you can do those things, that you can be a nuclear engineer in Hawaii. So read into that where you will. I'm not going to say where I work, but you're very clearly an intelligent individual. You can figure it out quite quickly. Should take some of the bloat out of the defense budget. No, the third rail in national politics is Social Security. And again, you really can't solve the national debt problem until you address Social Security and Medicare. I say, for me, if I could get the age to 79, which is life expectancy, I would do that immediately. Plus, that would fairly distribute the burden of the U.S. national debt on the boomers that voted it in the first place. But I'd compromise on 73. I think 73 is a very reasonable compromise. And if you're going to say, oh, what about the people who just can't afford it? The baby boomer generation, who are the people in their 60s and 70s right now, are the wealthiest generation to ever walk the fucking planet. These are people who got born in the prosperity of the 50s and 60s. These are people who went through the stock market boom of the 1980s, the stock market boom of the 1990s, the stock market boom of the 2000s, the stock market boom of the 2010s, and the current stock market boom. If at some fucking point you couldn't figure out to save money and start investing in it, then no, I don't feel obligated as a taxpayer to pay for 20 years of your retirement. You were bad with your money and you're going to have to work longer. That's very, very simple to me. I have very little sympathy for the baby boomer generation, the ones who are currently retiring and complaining about Social Security right now. Frankly, as a millennial, I don't think I'll ever see Social Security. I think we're going to run into some serious problems, maybe even, well, if Social Security is currently going to be insolvent by I think the year's 2036, unless cuts are made or taxes are increased. In either case, if it goes insolvent, no, Social Security won't disappear, but everybody's going to get about a 25% cut across the board, that's going to be very painful for a lot of people, most of whom at that point will be Gen X, who did not deserve such a fate. I think we should make the cuts now and hit the boomers where it really hurts, because the boomers are the ones who voted in all this debt and made Social Security a non-sustainable program. Social Security is the national... No, it will go away. It's the easy way to wake up from the nightmare is really simple, okay? You could solve Social Security tomorrow, make it solvent again forever if you did this. Start it at 73, starting immediately, and then tie it to life expectancy. And no grandfathering people in. I don't care if you get screwed over by this, fuck off. You're one of the boomers, you didn't save enough money, go back and work. This is what I feel very strongly about this one. I have no sympathy for the baby boomers who are looking to rely on Social Security for 20, 25, or 30 years of retirement because they were too foolish to actually save enough money to do it on their own. But cutting defense, I agree. I think there's plenty of ways that one could cut in defense. Remember, we spend more on defense than basically every other country put together at this point. And there are some programs that are absolutely incredible. But a great example of this is we don't really need tanks in the way we once did anymore. Nowadays, we mostly make tanks because it's pork barrel politics. It satisfies the local interest groups and companies that make tanks in certain congressional districts. We're never going to see a World War II style fight again in the world. Yes, Russia is doing that with Ukraine right now, but we're never going to put boots on the ground like that. Never. We're not going to do it. We have smarter means of fighting with air superiority, with naval superiority, and with nowadays space superiority. The only field of modern warfare where we do not have superiority and where we ought to increase the defense budget is cyber. We are woefully behind the Chinese on cyber, and it's partially why they steal a lot of our shit. We better be ready for them too, because 2027, the 100th year anniversary of the People's Liberation Army, is coming up. We do have to worry about that. And I know, right? I might know a thing or two here. That's all I'm gonna say. Again, you can figure out what a nuclear engineer does in Hawaii very easily. There's just not that many other things you could do. Coins, nice. I should have brought a chisel, that way I can turn these into bone fragments. Oh well. No, I do believe the national debt is, I would say, if I was going to say top 3 priorities for the United States right now. National debt, definitely number 1. Our obesogenic environment, which feeds into the healthcare crisis, is probably number 2, and then climate change is probably number 3. There you go. Speaking of things that really shouldn't have to be said, but yes, climate change is real. Yes, it's mostly human caused. The solution isn't socialism, though. It's nuclear energy. Okay, if you expected a nuclear engineer not to say that, I don't know what to tell you. The solution is nuclear reactors, really rather allowing the nuclear industry to do its job. Stop taking 10 years for the NRC to permit 1 reactor. We ask your defense to do a lot of extra shit outside of wars, like unnecessary DEI stuff. There's been a lot of social engineering in the military. My father, who served in the U.S. military from 1985 to 2014, saw a lot of this, especially at the end of his tenure, and he reviled it. It is not the military's job to be in the process of social engineering. There are certain combat roles that require physical traits that women, be they trans or cis, can't do. There's just, you need more physical strength than a lot of women have. And so what did DoD do instead? They lowered the standards. That's not good. No. Look, I am not against women in the military, but if you cannot meet the standard, you should not be in that role, because you're at that point, you're a liability to the mission. I know that sounds harsh. And again, plenty of famous, incredible women that have done a ton of stuff in the military, but there are certain roles that men and women are built differently for. And of course, there are exceptions. If you are an absolute monster lifting jack, Amazon kind of woman, go do that if you want to. But let's be honest, the numbers of those are very, very few. Statistically speaking, the number of men that have the physical strength and conditioning to do jobs that say, I don't know, special forces or the Green Berets, or a great example here, submarines, right? Submarines in the US Navy, there is a very finite amount of space in a lot of submarines. Previously on, say, the Los Angeles class, well, the heads, right, so heads being bathrooms, well, they were all male, because why wouldn't they be? There were no female submariners back then. It introduces a cost to make that happen, have separate men's and women's heads. Yo, 60 defense, nice. That's just one example. I'm not saying, again, women can't be submariners, they can, but it does introduce a cost. And Whether or not you think that cost is worth it, it's up to you. You're just gonna walk out? That's a bit disappointing. I feel like I didn't say anything particularly novel or offensive there, but all right. Well, it was nice talking to you. That's a pity. Well, just, again, this is the things I have seen with my own two eyes. There are some combat roles that women aren't really equipped for. There may be the one exceptional woman who can pass the standard, but we have lowered those standards. Again, I watched my father come home from working in the U.S. Air Force and say those words verbatim. And I really don't have a reason to distrust what he said or saw, or said he saw, rather. He made it fairly high up in DoD, and there is a point at which jobs in the DoD get very political. He despised that, and that's why he retired. But you don't spend 29, 30 years in DoD without seeing some shit and learning. And that's one where, you know, and he's not with us anymore, unfortunately. He's in Arlington National Cemetery, partially due to his service. But why would I... So now we're at 60. We're going to move to attack. But no, I'm likely to listen to that and say, okay, maybe that's not a good idea. Anyway, it's about dinner time here. I'm gonna go. I've got some somen noodles. I wasn't originally gonna use those, but that's what's happened. These flesh crawlers, by the way, remind me of all the fucking roaches around here. That's one of the downsides of Hawaii, because, well, you know, it doesn't really get cold here. The roaches never really go away. It's a pity. I was really enjoying talking with Luminary. Oh well. Let's head back up to the surface. We'll head up over to the bank because we need to chisel away these scepters. This is nice though. We can use the skull scepter. Someone looking for 150 mil in the clan chat. Bruh, no. Fuck off of that. Oh, perfect. We actually need a chisel anyway for this sapphire. Nice. Chisel that. Sweet. All right. Well, Omega, you still sitting around? Or it looks like... Wow, basically everyone left when I said that. I guess people don't like my opinions on that shit. Oh well. I'm not really going to change them based on what people do or don't like. That's fine. It's been a good chat. I've gotten flack on this before, that some people think I'm some sort of like crazy Trump person, like super in the tank for Trump and Elon. I'm not. There are some things where I like what they're doing, some things where I really don't. Really good example of this is funding for Amtrak and for public transit is probably going to go down the toilet over the next few months, which I don't like. One of the ones I do like, though, is that they're cutting food stamps for junk food, right? So you're no longer going to be able to buy Coca-Cola with food stamps. Good. We don't need to be subsidizing people getting effectively sick, because Coca-Cola and other soft drinks of that nature rot your teeth, are getting more and more links to Alzheimer's, screw with your pancreas, screw with your taste buds, screw with your brain chemistry, screw with your ability to process other sugars, and can reduce your gut health as well. There's nothing good about that. Why are we subsidizing this? Supposedly going to save 23 billion in direct outlays and up to 41 billion in knock-on healthcare costs, because most people who are on food stamps are also going to be on Medicaid. It's, again, I'm not judging anybody for that, but if you're in need of aid to get food, you're probably going to be in need of aid to get Medicare or to get healthcare, which means you're going to be on Medicaid. But no, there's plenty of other things that can be done. You know, people get mad about politics, and I don't get why. I was enjoying like talking to someone with a different opinion, but anyway, pretty good stream overall though. We talked about finances, talked about whole mess of stuff, taxes, talked about diversification of portfolios, but I don't believe I have any consultations for tomorrow. Maybe I'll do another Pokemon stream. Might do that. I'm gonna go get me some food, maybe pop into the Discord and chill out there. But tomorrow, yeah, I think we'll do a Pokemon stream. That sounds like fun. Tomorrow, hopefully y'all be there. I'm thinking it'll probably be in the morning. Really kind of depends on what else happens in my day. Oh shoot, so I gotta go get my laundry. I totally forgot about that. Oh well. Anyway, that'll be it for me today, y'all. As always, make good decisions, because those decisions form your actions, which form your habits, which form your values, which form an ethos, can be the guide star through the rough waters of life. Much love, y'all. Come in for the hug.